Hello and welcome to the Fathom Smart Talker webinar. I'm Craig Eason, and this week we're looking at the crew as an asset, not a cost. In recent months, interest in autonomous and unmanned ships has rocketed, and we hear of governments setting aside waters for testing of such vessels, of autonomous tugs being tested in Copenhagen, and remote controlled systems used on offshore vessels, and now of a container ship being built to run around the rocky coast of Norway, first with a crew, then unmanned, and finally autonomous. It would be easy then to believe that the day of the crew is done, that the last man on the ship should turn off the coffee machine before he or she walks down the gangway. Whether you support the technology advances that surround this talk of autonomy or not, the fact is crews will be needed for a long time to come. But there is no getting away from the fact that the ship, that multi-million-dollar asset, is changing. And as custodians of this asset, efficient operations and safety, do we need to transform our attitude towards them? Crew costs are one of the biggest costs for ship operators, and keeping them low is often seen as paramount. So this webinar will look at crew from that perspective. Should we begin addressing what the crew is needed for, whether we should change their role or train them differently? Also, and critical to this discussion, is how we treat them. Do we treat them with a sense of value? Now is a good time to remind you that if you are listening and watching to this webinar live, you'll notice that you have an opportunity to ask questions. You can type them in at any time. I will try and address them at the end of the webinar. During this webinar, we'll be looking at crew certification and training and the need to make it fit for purpose, and do that from the regulatory perspective. That's Dick Welch, Director of Isle of Man Registry and sponsor of this webinar. We also have Steve Jones, a former mariner and maritime executive, who's been working with the Mission to Seafarers to identify levels of crew satisfaction in a seafarer happiness survey. But first, Jeff Johnson, General Manager BP Maritime Services, is based in Singapore, and he's joined us to highlight the tanker operator's approach to crew quality. Tankers have some rigorous quality standards to work under, and it applies as much to the crew as the ship. What is the modern tanker operator doing to make sure that the crews of today remain an integral part of the business, a business that will be around in the future?
Hello, my name is Jeff Johnson with BP Maritime Services and BP Shipping. Put simply, we move BP's oil and gas across the world's oceans. We have a central role to play in the delivery of BP's objectives. Beyond our existing responsibility of managing BP shipping risks, we are required more and more to support our partners turn new opportunities into realities. Our goal, therefore, is to enable competitive advantage for BP by managing those shipping risks and delivering agile and innovative marine solutions. We must be able to provide both risk management along with these marine solutions in parallel. Our ability to deliver our goal will be a key enabler to sustaining BP's success in the future. BP is a global energy company with enormous reach across the world's energy system. From deep sea to desert, BP tracks, trades, and delivers the world's energy in real time, and BP Shipping and BP Maritime Services have a vital role to play in this. Apart from safely shipping BP's oil and gas, we support numerous upstream and downstream projects with our expertise, knowledge, and skills, and enable our integrated supply and trading group in new areas of the globe by providing innovative shipping solutions. We aren't driven by profit first and foremost, and our goal is to enable this competitive advantage and provide future value for BP. And we do that carefully by balancing both risk management and these marine solutions to the best of our ability. BP Maritime Services formed a decade ago and clearly proves our belief that people are our assets. The BP Maritime Services vision is to be the marine professionals, employer of choice, and an integral supplier of marine skills across BP. Between BP Shipping and BP Maritime Services, we currently provide 43 secondees to support BP Shipping and Group projects. Locations reach from the North Sea to Angola and from Indonesia to Alaska and everywhere in between. And since 2010, we have provided more than 150 secondees in total. Our capability and expertise is vast across BP Shipping and BP Maritime Services, where we employ over 700 marine engineers, over 150 master mariners, and 20 naval architects or more. In total, BP Shipping employs over 430 people ashore and roughly over 1,200 at sea. Our people fuel our business. Between BP Shipping and BP Maritime Services, we boast a variety of skills: seafaring, engineering, chartering, commercial, legal, and every other area of expertise needed to run our operations effectively. BP Maritime Services Singapore was established in 2007 with the purpose of developing the best talent in the shipping industry and deploying them where BP Group needs them, principally on BP Shipping's owned and operated international tanker fleet. Headquartered in Singapore and with our business partners in India and the Isle of Man, BP Maritime Services employs more than 1,200 officers, as said before, who run the operations globally aboard BP shipping vessels. Some of our maritime professionals may also be seconded or transferred to other BP companies to serve as subject matter experts for marine-related issues across the BP Group. BP Maritime Services strives for excellence through providing best-in-class training that is driven by an established performance and development team. This is different than most companies in that this holistic system is underpinned by a comprehensive competency assurance framework, as well as a defined performance criteria that has been set by Intertanko and SIGTO. The combination of open feedback and continuous development aims to unlock our officers' full potential and build a fluid talent pipeline. This process serves as an impetus for creating opportunities for career progression both at sea and ashore, and ensures that BP has its own supply of future marine capability. From a long-term sustainability perspective, BP Maritime Services has sponsored cadetship programs and still does in the United Kingdom, Poland, Ireland, India, and now Singapore. These programs are aimed at setting a solid foundation for the future through early and structured selection, incubation, and development of next generation of marine skills for us. What sets us apart is we have a full staff of PDOs, or Performance Development Officers, here that have line management accountability to help identify suitable development opportunities and personally oversee the performance management promotion process for his or her aligned tagged ranks. PDOs will engage with their aligned ranks to review their appraisals, their training requirements, and objectives, and understand their career aspirations. Hereby, the appropriate level of support will be provided to help fulfill the full potential of every individual employed by BP Maritime Services. BPMS strives to ensure that we have the right officer on the right ship with the right skills, doing the right thing for BP. That's very simply put. We're building the capabilities in the talent pool that require us to both man ships owned and operated by BP Shipping, as well as for other businesses within the group where marine expertise is required. We have a rigorous performance management system, and we hold people accountable for their actions in driving safe and reliable operations. The Performance and Development Management System, or PDMS, is in use for this purpose, and we are currently revamping it annually to make it continually fit for purpose, as well as aligning with changing group practice. We ensure all our officers are trained to the highest skills as required by the industry, to be compliant with standards adopted by governing bodies such as flag state requirements for certification and training. We extend the performance and development offer to our sea staff based on meritocracy through guidance, coaching, mentoring, all from our P&D team. Here we lead by example on setting high standards, and we raise the bar towards continuous improvement. We have an encouraging and competitive overall pay package for our sea staff, which has a variable component based on performance. Retaining the talent pool through personalized engagements with our PDOs and BPMS management, such as through face-to-face meetings on board, in the office, and at sea staff briefings, motivating and inspiring people to develop themselves for their own benefits and that of the company. We also monitor closely any underperformance in a supportive environment, providing an opportunity to improve. If there are no improvements to this, we rigorously manage them out of the company through robust and transparent and very fair HR practices. A separate BP company, also BP Maritime Services, but Isle of Man, was also established back in 2007, and it provides crew support and services to BPMS Singapore. This includes the planning and allocation of officers to our vessels, the implementation of crew changes and managing travel arrangements for the sea staff to and from vessels, and the numerous training courses we offer. With the majority of BP shipping vessels registered in the Isle of Man, BP Maritime Services Isle of Man carries out our flag state representative duties on behalf of BP Shipping, and includes liaison with the Isle of Man Ship Registry in the management of marine documentation, for our seafarers and other matters which require a close interface with the registry. BP Maritime Services is a certified ISO 9001 entity, and the BPMS Performance and Development Management System I spoke about earlier, PDMS, has in addition been certified by DNV-GL as an industry gold standard competence management system. It's clear from the above that we recognize that our seafarers are our biggest asset. We place the safety, security, and welfare of all our employees at BP Maritime Services not only as our first priority, but as a core value in everything we do.
That's Jeff Johnson, General Manager of BP Maritime Services based in Singapore, explaining the approach BP takes to crews working on tankers and gas carriers. And now's a good time to remind you, of course, that you can still ask questions. Type them into the box provided, email us, and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. Now, regardless of the ship type, in fact, probably regardless of the industry, happy people make better employees. But when you send your employee into a steel hull for lengthy periods of time, taking them away from loved ones, away from the social environment their peers take for granted, and even have to restrict their contact with the shore, are we getting that mix right? Add to this the increased complexity and other issues related to crews today, and the question, why should I consider such a career, is hard to answer. The Mission to Seafarers is one of the first to attempt to address this with its Seafarer Happiness Survey. Stephen Jones was tasked with putting it together.
Thank you to Fathom Maritime Intelligence for inviting me to speak about a topic which is very close to my heart, that of seafarers, their jobs, careers and aspirations. My name's Stephen Jones. I'm a former seafarer myself, and indeed one from 8 generations of those who've been to sea. I've recently been working with the Mission to Seafarers to relaunch a major new initiative, the Seafarers Happiness Index, which gives voice to those at sea and which paints the very pictures we'll be discussing in the webinar, that of how people be encouraged to stay at sea. It's great we're talking about recruitment and retention of seafarers, pondering the ways in which people are attracted to careers at sea, but even more importantly, what will make them stay once they become seafarers. All too often such debates can wander into the small-scale tactics that one company may employ over another, the battles which may keep seafarers going from one trip to the next, but there's far more to it than that. I personally believe that in thinking small, our results will be constrained. It's time to think strategically and address the fundamentals of why people are happy to go to sea. That is the pivotal issue, and it's one of relationships and strategically having happiness and satisfaction at the core of a seafaring career. All relationships rest on one key, pivotal and fundamental question. Are you happy? If the answer is yes, then it's likely that good things will happen. When it comes to retention, it means that happy parties are likely to stay together. Where the answer is no, then things better change fast, or people will likely leave. For some, the term happiness can sound a little naive, perhaps even childlike, but don't fall into the trap of thinking that way. Happiness is the key to so many things, in life and even maritime careers. So what does make seafarers happy? Well, thankfully, there's a way of finding out. The shipping industry often talks about seafarers and the problems facing them, but all too often it's done without real data and with little view of the realities of life at sea. Such gaps in knowledge suggest we know little of the building blocks of a productive job, fulfilling career and the demands of those working at sea. So what do seafarers really think, and how can we find out? Outside of academic research, there's often a dearth of evidence as to how seafarers actually feel about their jobs. As was mentioned, the one fundamental issue which is often overlooked is whether seafarers are actually happy. Measuring how happy people are about the various elements of their working life at sea gives the picture of the real successes and problems within seafaring and provides learning opportunities to improve. Such feedback is a blueprint to the improvements needed. By finding out how happy seafarers are, then the shipping industry can build a picture of where employers and seafarers are winning and losing. This is why the Mission to Seafarers has relaunched the Seafarer Happiness Index, to provide a vital, live and ongoing link with crews, and to report back to the industry. Happiness is the foundation on which everything is built. Happy people stick around. Happy people work well. They embrace challenges, they look to excel, and they share with others. While there are existing studies which assess the confidence of the shipping market and health of businesses as a whole, often these are affected by big macro issues. They talk of financial markets, socio-economics, and geopolitical concerns. It's obvious that such fundamentals would shape the shipping industry. Well, what of the small, real-life, micro-level effects, the everyday travails and challenges of seafarers? Remember, the real effect of how shipping is delivering for its people is felt in the cabins, wheelhouses, and control rooms on board. On container ships, bulkers and tankers, the industry is being shaped from the bottom up by the feelings of seafarers, the professionals who really shape shipping. Ultimately, stripping back from investors, the markets, clients, the media and the rest, it's the people on board who affect so much of how shipping delivers for the world and of how it's perceived. Thankfully, the Seafarer Happiness Index gives the chance to look past anecdotes and rumour and provide data where before there was just guesswork. Happy, satisfied, well-fed, fit and engaged seafarers are less likely to have accidents, they're less likely to become disaffected, and are the manifestation of the confidence which may be felt elsewhere up the industry chain. Happy seafarers make for a confident and thriving industry. So if you glean one thing from my presentation, take this. We need happy seafarers. And we need to ask questions to find out how they feel. From mental and physical health, diet, rest, workload, connectivity, training, access to shore leave, relationships at home and on board, there are real and vital questions that need to be asked and answered. The Seafarer Happiness Index consists of a standard set of these 10 questions, and these don't change. That means the ongoing levels of satisfaction are marked out of 10 and can be cross-analysed. By sharing their feelings out of 10 and by hopefully providing some written insight, suddenly the answers become clear. The survey is completely anonymous, but does ask for some key information regarding basics such as age, rank, vessel type and nationality to provide context. Here we're building a picture of what it means to be a seafarer and of how that affects people's happiness. Measuring how happy people are with the various elements of their working life at sea will give the industry a picture of the real successes, problems and guidance as to where improvements are needed. The Seafarer Happiness Index is based in part on the hierarchy of needs, the theory of motivations which drive people, so the questions address those areas and of what it means to be a seafarer. From the basic building blocks of biology and physiology, those absolutes of air, food, drink, shelter, warmth, sleep, we climb the pyramid, looking at safety and rules and how they are delivered, through to issues such as belonging and links to home, as well as what it means to be a seafarer. Are people proud to work at sea, or has that pride been eroded? With the top of the seafarer needs pyramid, we deliver on personal potential, self-fulfillment, growth and peak experiences. That is seafaring on a very good day indeed. Okay, admittedly we frame the index in a positive sense, looking at happiness, not misery. Lest we forget though, on the flip side, where things are not delivered and where the human and professional needs of seafarers are not being met, well here we see stress, anger, upset, resentment and a gradual decline in mental health and well-being. In this zone, seafarers will leave the company, perhaps even the industry, and can we blame them? But back to the positives for a moment. By finding out how happy seafarers are, then we can build a picture of the industry and where we're winning and losing. So the mission to seafarers has taken over the Seafarer Happiness Index because happiness is the foundation on which everything is built. In earlier reports, the Seafarer Happiness Index revealed fascinating trends and early warning signs. Crews have spoken of not only the erosion of shore leave, but the fact they've begun to dread port calls altogether. Another fascinating trend was the slashing of feeding rates and of budgets for spares. If seafarers are not being allowed shore, or actually cannot even be bothered with the hassle, then it points at wider problems. So too the reports on poor quality food or of ever smaller portions being served, or that vessels are not carrying enough spares or are being tempted to use non-original parts. Getting to see how seafarers feel and exploring their dissatisfaction about these key facets of life at sea means that shipping companies have a chance to learn from the mistakes of others. They don't have to wait until an accident, death or loss of crews to competitors. They can see where things are going wrong and readjust their business course, making the adjustments to make people happy. This means heading off problems. It means making life better and it means delivering a massive boost for seafarer retention. Happiness matters. Ignore it at your peril.
Stephen Jones running the Seafarer Happiness Survey. And another reminder to send in your questions on the Q&A, which will start after this next presentation. As I mentioned earlier, the shipping and maritime industry is facing huge changes in the application of technology and connectivity. And this, of course, is impacting crews. Dick Welsh, director of the Isle of Man Registry, believes it's about time the industry started thinking hard about what kind of qualifications or skills we need to ensure crews have to meet the modern and future challenges of the industry.
What I want to look at here is the digitisation from a ship's crew perspective, I guess. So I've put in a slide there showing the road to whatever that is, whether it's digitisation, whether it's autonomous shipping. And on this slide here, I'm basically showing that nothing has changed since my grandfather's era. My grandfather was an engineer who qualified in the 1920s, and we're still issuing certificates of competency for masters, for chief engineers, and we're sending cadets down a route of either a cul-de-sac as an engineer or a cul-de-sac as a master mariner. Of course, we are sending them for degree level now. Some things have changed, but basically we're still talking good old-fashioned steam and motor engineers and good old-fashioned mates and master mariners. And yes, we have global standards. Yes, it's all covered by IMO and STCW, but really not a lot has changed. And we're training to ideas and ship types that were established over 100 years ago. Looking at the international picture, obviously the International Maritime Organization is key to this, and it has established the standards and training and certification for watchkeepers, or STCW. And that's had various incarnations, starting in 1978, then a rewrite in 95, and then the latest rewrite with the Manila Amendments in 2010. Now that's 32 years of incremental change. And I would argue that many of those changes are relatively minimal. There's a massive lag in regulation versus reality and practice. And the regulation will only ever catch up after it's been debated and debated and debated in the Chamber at IMO. And we have an international agreement. And we have to think about the effect on the global supply of seafarers before we implement anything. It's things like the STCW whitelist, which assessed all the different countries and their training regimes to get a common standard, really was very, very difficult for the global community to achieve because it had to have the buy-in of the major labour supply countries. The international agreement to changes takes time. I've already mentioned that because of the number of different countries involved at IMO and the number of different elements of that, non-government organisations, seafarers organisations, and we understand why that must happen, but it really does take time. There's a number of different stakeholders in this. And I would argue that we're probably qualifying for yesterday, but we really should be training for tomorrow. And then we have flag states like Flag State IRON, which has to recognise these certificates. And at the moment, it's very much a paper trail, sending documents around the world, although we are putting these electronically. And that, again, the whole train of certification has to happen and has to happen in very quick time and get electronic certification out there. So what we really need to have is conversations around what today's world and what tomorrow's world and what the ships and the seafarers really need to change from what is a very outdated industry in terms of training through to what may be in the future. And in today's world, we know that ships are equipped, they're full of IT, high-tech equipment, satellite navigation, regular global positioning, which is recorded and which is available for other countries to buy data from. So there's a massive amount of change in the way that ships report, and we know where every ship is, what speed it's doing, what it's doing, and in terms of whole management of its performance. And we know that ships are connected, so we have all of this performance monitoring and that we can manage those ships remotely, it wouldn't take a huge step to go from what we have now, where they're managed on board, to where they're being managed remotely. And of course, the management of ships in itself is an issue at the moment. Senior manager, the master in command of the vessel, comes through a deck route, not through an engineering or IT route or a management route. So there's things to think about there. And we also know that crews are connected. So they're connected with the shore base, they're connected with their families and their homes. They have web-enabled ships, Skype, they have email, and they have social media, and all of the training elements available online also. So things have changed massively in that world. We know that bandwidth and SATCOMs are all important, and that crews will choose ships based on what kind of connectivity they can have. And if you want to look at bandwidth and SATCOMs and how important they are, you only need to look at the superyacht industry to see just how many SATDOMs that these vessels have on board. Because for the owners and the guests that charter these vessels, connectivity with shore is massively, massively important. So they carry much higher bandwidth and much greater connectivity than anything in the merchant shipping sector. But that's not to say that we can't move with that. And of course, steam and motor, sextants, compasses, less important, but still trained in the colleges. There's no requirement on board for digital, IT, technical competence. It is coming through, and we do have electrotechnical engineers and some qualifications for those. It's not demanded on board. And also they hit a glass ceiling in terms of how they can progress in the industry on board. And we need to ask ourselves, has anything really changed in the training colleges to qualify these young people for the world of maritime today? And tomorrow's world, what's it going to look like? Well, I'm just going to throw a few things out there. We've talked about autonomous ships. We've talked about the move to digitization. We've talked about shore operation stations. We think there may be remote operations. We may have to have riding, salvage or berthing squads to get that vessel once it's crossed a known and set route. It may have to be berthed by pilots and riding squads, or it may be able to fly by wire into a berth. And what do we need to equip the maritime professional of tomorrow? Well, I think one of the analogies that I've drawn here with these pictures is that what are the qualifications of the International Space Station crew? We certainly don't send navigators there. We certainly don't send engineers there. We send a blend of people who can cope with emergencies and who can stay connected to a massive, massive operation on planet Earth. And maybe that's the analogy. Maybe the operation stations are where all the brains are and the people are, and maybe we have either autonomous ships or ship operators on board without the kind of specialisms that we need today. And what are we going to do for the future? Well, I don't think that old men in suits like myself are going to sit around and find a solution to a problem. We shouldn't be looking for solutions. And if you look at the analogy in terms of what you carry in your pocket as a smartphone, the kind of tablets that we have, we had no need for these things 5 or 10 years ago. But somebody came up with them and they told us that we needed these things, and before too long, boy, do we need these things. And that's the way I look at this, is that we're not going to find a solution to a problem. The iPhone and the iPad wasn't generated as a solution to a problem. We were shown something and where we could take it, and year on year, incrementally, that gets better and better. We become more and more reliant on it, and that's the way I think our industry needs to go. So we're going to be looking for IT savvy, multidisciplined, multinational maritime professionals, and they need to be ashore and afloat. But that's an entire sea change, if you pardon the pun, in the industry, and those conversations need to happen now. To quote the great maritime leader that is Captain Jack Sparrow, the problem is not the problem, but the problem is your attitude about the problem.